So I saw the Garfield movie on a Monday. That was definitely not on purpose. Hey movie buffs, I'm Jack Benner, and welcome to my review of the Garfield Movie. The Garfield Movie is the newest animated film based on the famous comic strip. Chris Pratt is voicing the role of Garfield, and you got a supporting cast of Samuel L. Jackson, Ving Rhames, Nicholas Hoult, Hannah Waddingham, and many others. In this new animated film about the lazy, lasagna-loving, Monday-hating orange cat, living his life happily with John and Odie until one night he's unexpectedly reunited with his long-lost father Vic, voiced by Samuel L. Jackson. That reunion forces him to participate in a heist. I grew up with the character of Garfield from the comic strips and the newspapers, and I watched reruns of Garfield and Friends. And I did grow up watching the two Garfield movies from the 2000s with Bill Murray in it quite often. I really enjoyed watching these movies as a kid, and now I think they're okay movies that I kind of have a soft spot for, and definitely not some of the worst family films out there. And I even remember going to see the Garfield movie in theaters back in 2004. And I also want to mention the opening song Holla by the Baha Men. That song's a banger. And also I always found it hilarious that Bill Murray accepted the role of Garfield and he thought that the Coen brothers, Joel and Ethan Coen, were involved with the film, but it was actually Ethan Coen, his last name spelled differently. Oops. And Bill Murray has definitely regretted that decision, and he even made fun of it in Zombieland. Do you have any regrets? Garfield, maybe? I love that. So I was looking forward to hearing that there was going to be a new animated CG Garfield movie, because I felt like with an animated film, it could capture that same charm and spirit of the classic character. And the voice cast involved looked promising, although I was mixed on Chris Pratt as Garfield, but I was willing to give him a chance. And when the trailer came out, I thought it looked decent. First half with Garfield meeting John, that was cute. Rest of the trailer, alright. My expectations for this were so-so, could go either way. Could be enjoyable, could be decent, okay, or not that good. And now to give you my thoughts on the Garfield movie, here they are. I think the film is, not bad, but it's a mixed bag. Let's start with the pros. First pro, I think the animation is terrific. I've always really liked this animation style when it was used in the Peanuts movie and Captain Underpants, mixing 2D animation and CGI animation. And I think all of those movies know how to use that animation effectively, making it fast-paced, zany, and energetic, working well with the facial expressions and slapstick. And I even like noticing the attention to detail on the fur of the characters with Garfield and Vic. That's just great animation right there. And the voice cast is mostly solid. I'll get to one actor later. Samuel L. Jackson does a good job as Vic. Ving Rhames is good as a bull. Hannah Waddingham's entertaining. Nicholas Hoult does a decent job as John. And there actually is some heartfelt moments that do work, especially with the heart between Garfield and his father Vic. Garfield is upset at Vic because he thought he abandoned him that night. So I do like the conflict between those two later on in the film. And one scene that involves the both of them tied up to a tree and they're talking as a test to work together in a heist, followed by a scene of Vic's perspective on what actually happened the night he met John. And that entire scene I found to be the most touching scene of the film. And scenes like that I just felt like were few and far between. First half of this movie, it actually does capture that same spirit of Garfield. Felt like, okay, they are capturing the character just right minus the pop culture references, but they seem to be doing it just right. And then once we get into the second act with the heist and where that story kicks in, that's where it kind of lost me. Which brings me to the end of my pros, and now we're getting into the cons. First, the jokes in this movie just felt hit and miss. There are times where I did chuckle in this movie, found some jokes or moments to be quite funny, but then there are other times where jokes just fall flat and don't really land, and most of them rely on pop culture references. And the opening scene in this movie features Garfield ordering food on an app, and I was like, oh, are they gonna overuse the pop culture references here? And they kind of do with the cat version of Netflix, Catflix. Some other ones like cell phones and other apps like Tinder. And there are mention of other Tom Cruise movies, like there's a Mission Impossible reference when they're planning the heist. And also, was that because Ving Rhames is in this movie and he played Luther in the Mission Impossible franchise? And a reference to Top Gun with the theme, and also Garfield saying to the camera, Tom Cruise does my stunts. And the reason why I love the Peanuts movie so much was that it captured the same spirit of the Peanuts without modernizing anything. And that was such a relief for me, as that was a huge concern for me back then, and I love that movie. But here it just felt like, okay, these are just getting kind of old, and I don't really know if it was necessary to modernize the story. And to my next con, let's get to what I was worried about. Chris Pratt as Garfield. Now, let me just say this. I like Chris Pratt. I think he's a cool, funny, charismatic actor. I thought he did a fantastic job as Star-Lord in the MCU. Although he's fine in the Jurassic World movies, but they don't really give him a lot to work with. But for past animated films he's voice acted in, he fit very well for the character of Emmett with how naive and likable he is. And onward, I thought he fit his character quite well too, but ever since the Mario movie, where it just felt like, are they just casting Chris Pratt because they felt like he was right for the role, or because he was a big name? And he did an adequate job as Mario, and here my fears were realized. I wouldn't say Pratt did an awful job as Garfield, but I felt like he was miscast, and I felt like they could have casted a different voice actor that could have been more fitting for Garfield. I felt like I was just hearing more the actor. I just feel like I'm just hearing Chris Pratt as Garfield more than just Garfield. It's just Chris Pratt's voice as Garfield. I felt like maybe in a few moments he could have captured that same snark as Garfield, but it just wasn't entirely there, leading to a miscast lead performance. And next, this movie is pretty predictable. You can definitely tell where things were gonna go. Certain dramatic scenes you know where are gonna go. And there are certain things that come into play later with certain plot convenience where like, yeah, I knew that would come into play later. And one issue for me, this movie kind of has too many villains for me, where you have this one cat villain, Jinx, voiced by Hannah Waddingham, and her two henchmen dog villains. Okay, that's the main villain of the film and two secondary villains. But then the movie shoehorns in another villain, the security guard villain. That was this over-the-top character that, honestly, didn't really add that much to the movie. It just shoehorned in another villain just because. And honestly, if you take out that security guard character, you really wouldn't change that much to the story. To sum up, it's not without its moment, capturing that same charm of the character, and it does have its heart in the right place in a few scenes, but the Garfield movie just ended up feeling like a mediocre, forgettable, and disposable family film with hit-and-miss jokes and a miscast lead performance from Chris Pratt. I'm curious to hear what you think of this movie if you're fans of the character of Garfield. Curious to hear if you enjoyed this movie or if you felt the same way I did. It was, alright. If you have kids and want to take them to see this movie, they'll likely enjoy this movie. I did see potential for an entertaining animated Garfield movie, but it just wasn't entirely there, and I was hoping for something better and did leave the theater underwhelmed. And now to grade it, I'm going to give the Garfield movie 2.5 stars out of 5, a C+. Do I think it's better than the Bill Murray movies? It's been a while since I've seen them, so it might be better, but I don't think by much. If you haven't seen this movie yet, I don't think you should rush out and see it right away. I do think you should either wait for digital or streaming, likely on Netflix, because this did feel like the movie to just pass the time on Netflix. And so far hasn't really been the best year for animation, and especially when I have given two animated films a C+. This and Kung Fu Panda 4, and the latter of which, Kung Fu Panda 4, still my biggest disappointment of the year so far, and the more I think about that movie, the more I feel disappointed by it. But luckily, we are a few weeks away from Inside Out 2 in June, so I'm excited for that, and I hope that's a good sequel. So I would like to hear from you guys. What do you guys think of the Garfield movie? Have you seen it? Do you agree? Disagree with my review? Or if you haven't seen it, are you interested in seeing the film or not? Let me know down below. Did you enjoy hearing my thoughts on this movie and want to see more reviews like this in the future? If yes, please hit that like and subscribe button if you're new here, and don't forget that notification bell for my next upload in the future. It really means a lot. If you want to follow me on social media, all my links are in the description down below. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you want to see any more of my written reviews, I do have a Letterboxd account, so if you'd like to follow me on there as well. And until the next video, I'm Jack Benner, and look forward to another movie review.